Hello, my name is Jane Macnaughton. I'm Professor of Medical Humanities at the University of Durham in the UK. And I'd like to just briefly introduce a paper I've published in the special issue of Body and Society on breath. And the paper is called Making Breath Visible, Reflections on Relations Between Bodies, Breath and World in the Critical Medical Humanities. Now, this paper is a result of a project that I've been running over the last 5 years at Durham in association with colleagues at the University of Bristol. The project is called The Life of Breath, and it's been a project that has focused on a medical humanities approach to the symptom of breathlessness. Now, medical humanities is a field that's fairly new and emergent, and we in Durham believe that it could well have a major influence on the management and understanding of particularly chronic and complex symptoms and illnesses such as breathlessness and one of its conditions, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. That's why when we're taking a medical humanities approach, we're looking at the problem through a range of different disciplinary viewpoints: historical viewpoints, literary viewpoints, philosophical, anthropological, and clinical medicine and science, to try to get a sort of holistic view and to try to show that the lived experience of a symptom is not just something that can be understood through the modality of biomedicine. So this project has brought together all these different perspectives over the last few years and tried to bring them together in order to try to suggest ways in which we might better manage this problem. One of the key one of the key issues in relation to looking at this has been the issue of invisibility. Now, the first part of the paper, I look at the ways in which breathlessness is invisible for the experiencing body, within the social world, and within the political world. For the experiencing body, of course, breathlessness is what Drew Leder calls is a recessive symptom. So it's one that we're not so aware of unless it's called into awareness through the experience of breathlessness. Within the social world, people with breathlessness find it difficult to interact with others because breathlessness gets in the way of their being able to speak, gets in the way of them being able to walk and be outside, particularly in particular kinds of weather. And within the political world, breathlessness is invisible because of a degree of stigma related to it. And that stigma is partly because most of us associate people with breathlessness as having brought it on themselves because they smoke. Perhaps they're getting older, perhaps they're also obese. And there's a high degree of stigma and desire amongst people to hide away. But that has consequences because it tends to get forgotten about in terms of research funding. That's one of the reasons why the mortality rate for people with conditions related to breathlessness, such as COPD, has not fallen over the last 10 years, whereas that for cardiovascular disease has fallen by about 15%. Now, the reason why I think focusing on the idea of breathlessness is an important one for a journal like Body and Society is because breathlessness is a key way of getting at the interaction between the body and the world. The experience of breath is something that connects us very significantly and physically with the outside world. If you were to open out the alveoli of the lungs to lay it along a space, it would take up half the space of a tennis court. So there's a huge area of interaction there physically with the world. But also we interact, the breath has major symbolic and religious meaning. Breath is the first thing we do when we come out of our mother's wombs. It's the last thing we do when we die. It's very pervasively connected with being alive, being in the world. And one of the key elements of this relationship between the body and the world in relation to breath is the sensory modality of interoceptive awareness. And interoceptive awareness is the relationship, is the experience of your own body's internal workings. And there is some evidence to suggest through recent neuroscientific work and psychological work that in people with chronic illness, interoceptive awareness is doused down, partly because I think people tend not to want to be so aware of their body when it's got these kinds of problems. So that tells us, the experience of breathlessness tells us that the relationship between the body and the world is a dynamic one. It's very much related to the ways in which we experience life. So the more difficult it is to breathe, the more our body kind of suppresses the sense, or the more our brain suppresses that felt sense of the body and wants to ignore it. So one of the things we need to try to do is to try to understand how we can, as Bruno Latour suggests, how we re-articulate that relationship. And understanding that dynamism is critical to it. And the more that we think about, study and look at the idea of the relationship between breath, the body and the world, the more I think it will support us in helping to understand that. So the second part of the paper explores that in a little bit more detail, drawing upon some of these phenomenological ideas, particularly from Drew Leder and Bruno Latour, and calls for, at the end, a new focus on breath and breathlessness as a way of understanding and deepening our ideas of the body. I hope you enjoyed the article. Thanks for listening to this.